You're listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. From our studios come special guests and netball commentary, exclusively on YouTube.
Good morning, listeners, and welcome to the 3 Feet Radio Show. It's a very exciting day today. We're going to be talking all things netball, and g'day Luke, my co-host.
G'day Ben, and I think we skidded over some black ice when we were driving to the studio, or at least at the Kiwi end, but fortunately our guest arrived on the couch safely.
And joining us this morning is Netball Australia CEO and Kate Palmer. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Ben. Good morning, Luke.
First of all, just to get things going, how did you view the 2015 ANZ Championship season, and from your perspective, what were the positives to come out of it?
Well, look, if I can just put my Australian hat firmly on for just a moment and say what was really exciting for me was the performance of the Australian teams, both on and off the court. So for me, seeing the progress across this last 12 months, I guess it's been an annual step up, but this year I seem to be almost like we've reached that tipping point and we've gone over the top, and so with numbers up in the stands, with broadcast ratings up, and then the performance of the Australian teams so wonderful. So it was a real highlight, the grand final for me, but and that just really I guess gave a good example of for us, a summary of the season, how outstanding it was. If I put my T10L hat on, I'd say, the concerns for the future of the competition because of the quality of the New Zealand teams is a concern. But I have heart in the fact that Netball New Zealand is doing everything to change that. And certainly I know the New Zealand teams are working hard at that as well.
Well, we could spend probably the entire program just discussing the New Zealand teams and how they came about, to be honest, but we won't do that. So
No.
I asked the listener to, forgive me for not generally raising that point a bit further, but just as a follow-up, where do you see the ANZ Championship in 2016 heading generally?
Well, look, I think building on to this year, really, we need to continually evolve, and I think innovation requires us to is important to the future of the competition, so we can't stay the same. And so bedding down the conference system, I think yes, there are some issues with it, but what it did present was a lot of interest on both sides of the channel around, the final series. At the end of the day, the two best teams finished in the grand final, and that was important. So for us now, it's about what could we improve. There will be some new rules agreed at Congress in Sydney in August, and speed the game up will improve the game, reduce the whistle. So there'll be some changes that you'll see around the rules. But then for me, it's really around how can we invest in engaging with our fans in a better way. So what does match entertainment look like? What does the pre-game engagement in the foyer, the activation look like? How can we actually make sure that our fans are really getting what they need? And we're seeing much more engagement. And I love I'm an avid reader of things like Netball Scoop, and I must admit, listening, actually hearing what the fans are saying about the future is really important to us. And so the recent survey, it's actual fact it's out now. I'd obviously encourage everyone to do that survey, because it informs us, what the fans want, which is the most important thing.
Kate, you mentioned the reducing of the whistle. I know a lot of just casual netball watchers say to me often, Ben, we like the game, but there's too much whistle. Do you feel by reducing the whistle, it'll increase more people coming to the games and more people wanting to watch it?
Well, I think what it'll do is people will enjoy it more. And so, look, the reality is the umpires only blow their whistle when the players break the rules, and they're umpiring according to the rules. So it would help if the players didn't break the rules. So that would certainly reduce the whistle. But and this is a personal bugbear, I think that they try and blow the pee out of the whistles. So we need to find a whistle, and I know they've done some research around how can you make sure the athletes can hear it, because sometimes in stadiums it's quite loud. You don't need to blow the pee out of the whistle when you're blowing for a centre pass or in any instance. So let's lower the the sharpness of the tone and then remove, which is easy. So, for example, if you remove it from a goal, when a goal's scored, you could lose nearly 100 whistles in a game immediately. So I think it's about the enjoyment of the game and certainly, in the stands, I find it very irritating myself, and I'm a bit of a traditionalist. So imagine if you're new to the game, it'd just drive you crazy, I think. So it's a personal bugbear, I admit that, but we have to do something about it. That is one thing we're hearing the fans saying a lot. Not only the fans, but as you say, people who are new to the game, they wonder what the hell's going on. And look, the umpires, I think, letting athletes contest the ball is really, really important, and we're seeing that evolving as well as our athletes are getting stronger and faster and fitter. So are our umpires, and they need to start letting the athletes contest the ball, keeping their whistle in their hand and not blowing it, and letting the game go on. So I think it's something that will improve the game enormously.
And Ben and I have talked about umpiring a fair bit on previous shows, and we've taken different angles. And, broadly, without going into too much detail, I would agree with you on the amount of whistle that can occur in some games. But
Yes.
I just want to switch gears up here a little bit, and this is something Ben and I were talking about off air, and I find this question quite interesting. But what are the challenges of governing a sport that is national and played everywhere compared to, say, rugby league that has been played primarily, in New South Wales and Queensland, and that's where it has been mostly popular?
Well, I don't see it as a challenge, really. I see it as quite exciting and an opportunity for us because the success of netball in Australia sits behind the capability of our state and territory bodies. And so for us, it's about having strong, healthy state associations, and I have to say they're doing incredibly well. So that's important for us, and it's exciting because we know, and I actually was in Perth on Monday, and hearing what's happening in Western Australia in our sport is, for me, just it makes my heart sing, really, because numbers are up across the board. They've got a really strong, healthy workforce who are very passionate. I met most of them, and they're very passionate about what they do. And that probably I would see in every state and territory body. So the challenges are really around, I believe, the international scene. And for me, working at the national level, that's one of the most exciting parts of my role is actually the rest of the world and the role that Australia can play in developing the game internationally. But also being mindful that our members are very diverse and they have very different resources across the world. So what role can Australia do in supporting the International Federation? I have enormous respect for them, and I'm probably biased because I'm currently an international board member, but I believe that they're on the right track. Their strategy is right. They just need more resources, and that's where big countries like Australia, New Zealand, England, South Africa, and even Jamaica need to come into play.
Kate, you mentioned Netball WA. That's great to hear because unfortunately sometimes what happens is you have at the very top the ANZ team in each state doing so well, but it doesn't always flow down. But I think the success of the Fever and also the success of the Western Sting at the moment in the ANL is reflected in the levels below in WA, and it's great for the state.
Well, it is. It's, the community and actually their head of their community programs talked about one of the Fever games where they hosted they had their Association Championship teams 10, and she said how critical it was to connect the community because it is their community. They need to be able to see that there's a pathway to the Fever and the Diamonds, and she said it was just so wonderful having them in the stands, but playing themselves across the weekend, and it's actually about how engaged and positive they are about the sport in WA. I think it's a credit to their organisations but at all levels, club, association and state. So for us, seeing the growth, and we need now, we're going to have a really strong growth agenda over the next 5 years to actually make sure that we make that sustainable. And of course, I'm a little bit biased, and I really, really want to see the Fever win the ANZ Championship. So I did have a chat to Stacey and said, "Come on, the pressure's on. It's really important that they sustain their success as well."
I think, just briefly, I think the Fever are going to sustain the momentum they've built. I think under Norma Plummer and their current coach, they've got a wonderful foundation there.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I agree.
I think other teams in the ANZ Championship, won't name them, but they can look towards that, I think, and they should study it rather carefully. But moving along, I want to come back to the Netball World Cup. And in your view, Kate, how important is the success of the upcoming Netball World Cup in terms of the sports media coverage and commercial opportunities improving?
Well, it's critical, really, and that's one of the things we've already talked about. Is we can't wait another 25 years after this year. We need to host it more regularly than that, and so for us, it's absolutely critical. All of the legacy projects we've put around the World Cup are part of our core business. So we're not making up new programs or doing new things. We're innovating in our core business, and one of the great things about World Cup is it's brought resources to the table from the federal government, the state government in New South Wales, from Netball Australia, from our state bodies. And so with all of the resources combined and focusing on core business, we're going to see some great outcomes. I actually was talking, we've talked about 1991 and how that changed the game in Australia. We want to make sure that when we get that lift in participation and interest from corporate Australia and the broadcasters, that we can actually capture that and then make sure that we move forward. So it's the conversation for since we won the bid, has been around maximising the opportunity, and that's why we're looking at now what are the growth strategies, what are we making sure that we're doing in the next 5 years to make sure that we sustain the growth that we're going to see following the World Cup. So it's going to be a really exciting opportunity over, we're there for 17 days for a range of different things. International relationships is obviously one of the other key things, and we're putting together quite a good package for our visitors to take home with them, so that hopefully that they can, look at some of the things we're doing here and whether they can apply in their countries.
And Kate, you were talking about a lack of resources and things within the wider sphere of international netball. An example of that is a team like Malawi, but with little resources, they've been one of the success stories of developing nations in world netball. How important do you think is it for nations like Malawi to continue to have success at events like the Netball World Cup and Commonwealth Games? Because it basically shows for other developing nations with small resource pools that if you work hard and if you do what you can with the resources you've got, you can do anything.
Look, I agree with you, and I've always said that if countries like Malawi had the resources that Australia had, they would beat us every time. And they have done incredibly well. They showed the way for a range of other countries. They've showed that it's possible if you have a good system and structure in place. And I think that would be one of my the main points about most developing countries. Often they, because of lack of resources, they look to short-term solutions. So they might appoint a coach for a short period of time instead of looking at a sustainable high-performance system across a 4 or 8 year period, so that they're actually developing their pathways and strengthening their pathways. And Malawi has worked very hard to put some strong systems and great coaches in place, and they've travelled, which has been a credit to them with very few resources. So, look, I think it's absolutely critical to the future of the sport. There's no good. Look, we want to be the best in the world. We want to be number one, but who cares if there's no one to compete against? And we would rather have to beat 10, or 20, but 10, even at least 10 really strong nations at the World Cup, rather than at the moment where we've really probably got 6 nations that could be in it to win it. So that's something that I think the sport, we're shifting. We can see it internationally. We can see the level of interest in the sport internationally. If we could only get some more resources, there must be a international corporate out there that says, this is the game. There's 20 million women play the game internationally. If we all started talking with the same voice, and that's a really important thing, saying the same things about why our sport is so great, then I think we could move forward.
Well, there are some points I would like to raise with you about growing the game overseas. I think they're better done in a different environment. But
okay.
Just to put it in perspective for our listeners and yourself, Kate, I do invite both the listeners and yourself to listen to our previous interviews with Sonia Ottaway at Netball America. That's perhaps the best way of doing it here. But just staying with countries like Malawi, what do you think the likes of Australia and New Zealand can do for Malawi? Do you think, say, just to use New Zealand as an example, that it would be good for the New Zealand A squad to tour Malawi?
Yeah, so look, I think international competition is really important because you can then you have a benchmark about performance. But I think the other thing is around sustainable systems. So what high performance expertise could we share with Malawi without giving away the trade secrets, of course? But I think that's the reality is that yes, you've got to play each other, but you also need to be able to understand what the pathway looks like. Our head of sport development here at Netball Australia, Anne-Marie Fippard, says the best high performance strategy has a really strong base. And so having lots of young girls and boys, but in our case girls, in programs, in quality programs like Net Set Go, starting their careers in a participation program that gives them the right skills very early on and gives them the passion for the game is really important. So those countries need to look at not only the top end, but also what's happening in terms of the depth of their talent across their countries.
And just about you personally, Kate, away from netball, you're a member of several boards, including the Melbourne Cricket Ground Trust, and you're also the chairman of the Victorian Institute of Sport. Do you find these positions as a good opportunity to not just advertise netball, but also to network within the sports industry too?
Yes, well, actually, I've just finished my last term as a trustee of the MCC. It was actually only just last month, but a fantastic 11 years on the MCG Trust or MCC Trust. Look, it's a fantastic opportunity for me. It has been a great opportunity for me to be part of that type of environment. And certainly when you look at institutions like the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which for me was great for me, but it was really around what does that mean for Victorians and Australians, and it's the most wonderful ground, and I think I feel quite passionate about it. But then at the Victorian Institute of Sport is how can I add value to that organisation? It's a quality organisation. It also faces its challenges around resources, but it does amazing things for athletes in Victoria and Australia. So for me, it's learning. In actual fact, being in that environment with a CEO in the calibre of Anne-Marie Harrison means I have to say I actually have learned a lot as well, which has been really nice. But networking, I think networking with people that are different to you is really important because you get different inputs and you get different ideas. And so I actually also have fundamentally that it's important that we all give back to the system and make sure that this is what we do. I volunteer in these roles, and I believe it's important for Netball Australia in terms of what I can learn and how we network, but it's really important that we all contribute to strengthen the industry. And my small contribution is, I think, just part of the puzzle that makes us a better industry.
And I would agree with you on networking. I do think because we're so rugby-centric in New Zealand that perhaps, and this probably extends to even some of our ANZ Championship coaches, they don't necessarily do enough networking with other sports. I could certainly think, for instance, it'd be benefit for some of our ANZ Championship coaches checking out perhaps the fitness regimes of an AFL team. But just briefly, and just moving away from that, for the benefit of the international listener, the Victorian Institute of Sport, does that tie directly into the Australian Institute of Sport?
Yeah, so it all forms part of a national institute network, and so the Australian Institute of Sport now has been restructured over the last 2 years, and that we have a system called the Australia's Winning Edge, and so the program doesn't have residential scholarships anymore. So, for example, netball uses it for a range of camps. Our Netball Centre of Excellence is based at the Australian Institute of Sport. So we take, as an example, we take the Diamonds into camp there, but we also we had a camp with all of a range of tall athletes. We have specialist camps. We bring coaches in from around Australia as well to work with the athletes so that everyone understands what we're trying to achieve in our high performance system. The Institute, the VIS, works closely. In actual fact, Anne-Marie Harrison, the CEO there, is the chair of the network of all of the CEOs at the institutes around Australia, and they talk about things that are really important to the collective. Most of them are linked with their particular state government. So it's a great system. It's always has we always seek to improve, of course. And it's all the most critical thing in any high performance system is that the athletes are absolutely centred to it all. And, we have great pride in the fact that the VIS, that every ounce of resource that we have goes into delivering a high performance environment for our athletes. And that's absolutely the mantra of our system in Australia.
All right, Kate, thanks very much for joining us today. It was good to talk to you. It's been a long time between drinks, and hopefully I'll see you around before Netball World Cup. Unfortunately, due to work commitments, I can't make it to the Netball World Cup.
Oh, no. Well, make sure you watch it on television then.
Of course I will. No, I've actually, you could say in terms of work, I've switched codes a bit. I'm actually working for the AFL umpiring department at the moment.
Wow. Well, good. That's that a bit. Well, they're a very professional outfit, so you'll enjoy that.
I am, but I must say I did enjoy working with you, and I do continue to enjoy giving netball the coverage it most definitely deserves.
Good on you. Thanks, Ben. And thank you very much, Luke, and nice to meet you.
It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. Tune in next time for more special guests and netball commentary exclusively on YouTube.